This day in sports history. Hey, this is Steve White, the host of This Day in Sports History. I live in western North Carolina, where Hurricane Helene left a trail of destruction and devastation. I'm fine and came through it without many problems, but elsewhere, the situation is dire. So many across this portion of the state and the region lost everything. Those who still have a home may still be without power or access to clean or running water. Some are trapped by washed-out roads. Communication has been severed. Consider a donation to the Western North Carolina Red Cross or another local charity that's doing work to help those affected by the storm. Let's bring some normalcy back to life for so many who have been disrupted. I've put some links in the show notes if you would like a few suggestions. Thanks. Here's today's episode. It's October 5th, and there were a couple of records set on this day. Let's start off in 2001, when Barry Bonds became the all-time single-season home run king. The San Francisco Giants had 3 games left in the season, all against the LA Dodgers. Bonds entered this game with 70 home runs for the season, equaling the record that Mark McGwire had set just 3 years earlier. His 70th had come the night before, and with his pace of hitting a home run every 2 1/4 games, there was a good bet that he would get number 71 before the series with the Dodgers was over. Well, he answered that question pretty quickly, trailing 5-0 in the bottom of the first, and at 8:14 p.m. Pacific time, Bonds ripped a Chan Ho Park pitch into the right field seats at Pac Bell Park. It was a solo shot, so it didn't make much of a dent in the deficit, but nobody there that night really seemed to care. Bonds was now the single-season home run record holder with 71, and as he trotted around the bases, chants of his name filled the stadium. After touching home plate and a bear hug from his son Nikolai, he went to the dugout to share a moment with his dad, Bobby. He came out for a curtain call that lasted more than 6 minutes. Now, give some credit to LA and Park for actually pitching to Bonds. With a 5-0 lead in the first and 2 outs when Bonds came to the plate, they could have pitched around him, let him have the base on balls, and then pitched to Jeff Kent. In the Giants' previous series with Houston, Bonds had been walked 8 times and then hit by a pitch in his 14 plate appearances in that series. But Dodgers manager Jim Tracy told his pitcher to challenge Bonds, saying the integrity of the game was more important than not having Bonds achieve baseball immortality at his team's expense. Bonds took advantage of the generosity, and when he came back up in the third with none on and no outs, he buried another Park pitch in the center field seats for number 72. That made it 8-5 Dodgers. The Dodgers spoiled a little bit of Bonds' night, hanging on for the 11-10 win over San Fran. Bonds would pick up home run number 73 in the final game of the year to set the current season home run record. On this day in 2003, Dante Hall, a.k.a. the Human Joystick, ran a punt back for a touchdown. Now, knowing that Hall was a speedy return man with the amazing ability to make people miss or grab at air, that's not so tough to believe, but what is amazing about this one is that it was the 4th consecutive game that Hall had returned either a kickoff or a punt for a touchdown. This was a key AFC West divisional game between the 4-0 Denver Broncos and the 4-0 Chiefs. In the fourth quarter, with the Broncos up by 6, Denver punted it away. Hall backpedaled to his 3-yard line, reeled it in, and then went into joystick mode, weaving his way through the Broncos coverage team for the 97-yard touchdown return. That gave the Chiefs the 24-23 lead, which turned out to be the final score. Hall's 4 straight games with a kick return for a touchdown set a new NFL record, and it still stands today. On this day in 1985, legendary Grambling head coach Eddie Robinson earned win number 324, passing legendary Alabama head coach Paul Bear Bryant as the all-time winningest college football coach. Grambling was playing at the Cotton Bowl against Prairie View A&M. Nearly 37,000 people watched the game live, and more than 500 journalists from around the country were there to cover it. The game was hardly ever in doubt, which made the fourth quarter one long celebration. This was Robinson's 45th season coaching the Tigers. When the horn sounded to end the game, Grambling had won 27-7, and Robinson was all alone at the top. He was mobbed by his current players and lauded by the thousands of players that he'd coached over the years. He would continue to coach for another 12 seasons and finish with a total of 408 wins. That record would stand until 2011, when Joe Paterno won his 409th. St. John's of Minnesota coach John Gagliardi is the current record holder with 489 wins in his 64 years of coaching. And just yesterday, I talked about the Brooklyn Dodgers finally ending their frustration in the World Series when they won it in 1955. Well, what happened on this day in 1941 is a great example of the many ways that a winning team found a way to lose in the World Series. And just like the 55 series, in 41 it was the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Yankees playing for the championship. It was Game 4 with the Yankees holding a 2-1 lead with 2 outs in the top of the ninth and holding on to a 4-3 lead. It looked like the Dodgers were going to even the series up. Hugh Casey was on the mound facing Tommy Heinrich. Casey delivered a sharply breaking curveball to the plate. Heinrich swung and missed for the third strike. But Dodger catcher Mickey Owen also missed it. The passed ball rolled to the backstop, and Heinrich raced to first. Instead of the game being over and the series tied at 2 games apiece, the Yankees rallied for 4 runs in the top half and went on to win the game 7-4 and take a 3-1 lead in the series. The 33,000 at Ebbets Field collectively groaned, only in Brooklyn. The Yankees closed out the World Series the next day with a 3-1 win. And maybe this seems strange now with the number of women that cover sports as writers and broadcasters, but on this day in 1991, NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue handed down a $30,000 fine to Cincinnati head coach Sam Wyche for not allowing a female reporter into the Bengals locker room after a loss at Seattle on Monday Night Football. To be fair to Wyche, he was attempting to protect his players, saying he respected their privacy, and he wasn't bending on allowing a woman into a locker room with 50 naked men. He made a couple of suggestions to try to make things, well, let's say, separate but equal, such as bringing players to any female reporters outside the locker room, or opening the locker room for 15 minutes post-game with all players fully clothed, and then everybody had to leave until all were showered. None of those alternatives worked for the league office. Now, on the flip side of that, I will interject myself a little bit into this story. I worked as a sports reporter and videographer for a station in an NFL market years ago. Several women reporters covered the team after practice and games, and they had full access to the locker room. There was never any inkling of unprofessional behavior. The women, just like us dudes, were there to do a job, be respectful, get the story, and then leave. After the fine, the Bengals opened up the locker room to all reporters. Time now for today's Zero to Do with Sports Did You Know? Did you know that Simon Cowell, the guy from American Idol and America's Got Talent, worked menial jobs before making it big? That's not too unusual, but one of those menial jobs was working on the set of The Shining as a showrunner. Most notably, he shined the axe used by Jack Nicholson between takes. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for stopping by. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow on This Day in Sports History.